Good afternoon and welcome to our August webinar, a collaborative presentation by the Parent Training and Information Center and the Recruitment Training and Support Center at the Federation for Children with Special Needs. My name is Janie Kreco and I am the Training and Support Specialist at RTSC. Our technical producer is John Sullivan. Roxanne Hoke-Chandler, Family Engagement Specialist at the Federation, is our presenter today. Roxanne is a Boston native who was educated in the Boston public school system. She continued her education at Lesley University and earned her MS in management. She currently works with the Massachusetts Center for Family and Community Engagement, FACET, partnering with school districts to improve student achievement. She speaks at forums on childcare, literacy, healthcare disparities, and parents' rights for children with special needs. Her passion is working with hard-to-reach and underserved populations. Roxanne's greatest passion, however, is being a mother to her two daughters. Today's webinar is Increasing Cultural Competence in Educational Settings. If you are interested in learning more about the Federation, please go to our website at www.fcsn.org and explore all the different programs, including how to volunteer to become a special education surrogate parent or attend one of the many trainings presented by the Parent Training Information Center. Welcome, Roxanne.
Thank you, Janie. It's a pleasure being here. So, the workshop objectives are as follows. Participants will recognize and acknowledge their own cultural heritage and identity, explore the values and customs of different cultures, and develop strategies on how to support students. The first section of the workshop invites you to think about your own heritage and become a more broad meaning of culture. And the second will give us strategies to work with students of diverse settings. Culture. When we think of the word culture, many different ideas come to mind. Think about the first things that come to your mind when I say, what is culture? We all might have different definitions of it. When we think of culture, it's a combination of feelings, attitudes, beliefs, values, and behavior patterns that is shared by either a racial, ethnic, religious, or social group. Some of the groups that we are part of or identities we have are external, like the color of our skin and our gender. Others are more internal, like religion, education. All of these group members or cultures shape our thoughts, feelings, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. How much do you know about the cultures around the world? This is a little quiz that you can give yourself. It is quite interesting, things we learn about different cultures. So let's take some time to review some of the questions. Which two cultural groups tend to avoid direct eye contact when talking to authority figures as a show of respect? Thinking about two. The correct answers are Japanese and Latino. A lot of people might have gotten Japanese correct. Latino, think about what generation the person is to this country. Is the person first generation, second, or third? Also, Latino is very broad. There's subcultures underneath being Latino, so it might be specifically where they're coming from. The next question. Which is a common practice that Southeast Asians believe protects a mother and her fetus? Would it be A, sitting upright in her chair, B, taking herbal medicines, C, bathing in the morning and at night, or D, wearing cotton clothing? The correct answer is B, taking herbal medicines. There are some cultures who just do not believe in our modern Western medications, and a lot of folks have heard of the book, The Spirit Catches You When You Fall Down, and it's a story about just that, about how our medicines aren't universal. to some cultures. For the next question, why did the same disposable diapers that have sold so well in the U.S. initially flop in Japan? A, they cost too much. B, they were not recyclable. C, there wasn't enough room in the average apartment to store them. Or D, the materials weren't natural. The answer is C. There wasn't enough room in the average apartment to store them. Okay. And for our last question, why did the cellular telephone market in Quebec far less developed than through the rest of Canada? A, there is no infrastructure to support cellular devices. B, French Canadians are more laid back and don't always need to be reachable. C, using cellular phones in public is thought of to bring bad luck. Or D, there are too few cellular providers to meet the demand for services. The correct answer is B. French Canadians are more laid back and don't always need to be reachable. Oh, I'm sorry, one more question. Number 5. Which group considers the head a sacred part of the body and therefore thinks it's important not to pat or touch someone's head discriminately? A, English. B, Russian. C, Hawaiian. Or D, Native American. The correct answer is C, Hawaiian. In the Hawaiian culture, there are a lot of cultures merged together, a lot from Asia and different parts of Asia, and that is also something that's common in some Asian cultures. So, there are the answers that you can look back on later on and test your friends and family. When we think of cultural elements, they can include things like race, nationality, language, family, age, and music, and food. But they also include things like religion, political ideology, child raising, disability, sexual orientation, gender, roles, and a whole lot more. Make the connection that each person is an individual that shares values, group identities, customs, etc. that are part of who they are, but is also the essence of who they are as an individual. Thinking about culture, there are other things that we can include as well, like socioeconomic factors, family structure, military families, experiences with trauma and homelessness, family medical histories, and families who have incarcerated family members. This is the iceberg of culture. It lists different parts of the culture. The things that are visible, which is on the surface, are things that people see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. Explicit learn, things they're conscious about, that can be easily changed, and the objective of knowledge. They're shared in excess, things like in terms of culture, food, music, people who love the arts, sometimes language. Then we go a little deeper for the invisibles, into deeper culture, what people believe, what they value, what they think, the implicitly learn. Things are also unconscious and difficult to share and have subjective knowledge. Deep culture is not always easy to point out, like courtesy, concept of time, personal space, rules of conduct, facial expressions, nonverbal communications, body language and touching. When things are unconscious rules, the things that aren't talked about as much, and sometimes not realized, like their notions of modesty, leadership, disease and disability, maybe attitudes towards others. What about you? What are some of your specific cultural elements that have affected your sense of identity or your behavior? Think about how you were raised and how that might have affected it, how you define your self-identity, your communication style, the relationships you have with others. It's always good to think about yourself before you venture out to understand other cultures. Remember, understanding a student or a student's family's cultural identity and values is vital to gaining their trust. However, each individual belongs to multiple cultural groups and cannot be fully defined by any one cultural identity. Each individual is made up of unique combinations of cultures, identities, and personal values. Also,
Thanks, Roxanne. I just want to point out that for the members of the audience that might be working in the foster care system or the child welfare system, that if you have an understanding of your student or your child's culture, and part of that culture could be the foster care culture or the culture of the birth families, that you can engage with those students or children in a much more trusting relationship. And as many of you know, that is one of the most important things, that trusting relationship, that safe relationship, to advance academic performance for kids who have some history of complex trauma. So even though the child may no longer live with their family, their birth family, that their family culture and values remain very, very important to their self-identity and should probably be encouraged as a way to increase self-esteem and self-determination.
Thank you, Janie. So how can you relate to these different kinds of students? You do this by developing a greater comfort in responding to the unique needs of each population. Some strategies can be to practice being more observant, learning from each student, and ideally to gain their trust. It's natural to feel most comfortable with being people who are like yourself, or at least people who want to be like you. In our work, we work with people who are unlike you in many different aspects of their lives. Some of them might have cultural traits that you just don't understand or necessarily like. If you tend to ignore or reject the unfamiliar aspects of their culture, you will not be able to help them, and you'll miss the opportunity to grow yourself. Looking at the census from the U.S., you take a look at how 13.1% of the U.S. population was foreign-born. That might not surprise many people. It also depends sometimes on where you were born and what you're used to looking at. 9.7 entered the U.S. post-2010, and 14.8% of the Massachusetts population was foreign-born. And it estimates that Latin America and Asia are the leading birthplaces for all of the foreign-born residents. So that gives us a little bit of idea of the whole of the United States. But looking specifically on ethnic backgrounds of the students here in Massachusetts, 65% are white and non-Latino. And this slide also shows the percentage that graduated. We have 17% Hispanic or Latino, 8.7% are African American, then we have 6% Asian. Many people are clicking up multiracial but non-Hispanic, and we have the populations of Native American, Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander. And take the time to look at the percentage of the amount of students who graduated. When we think about language in Massachusetts, the top 5 languages are Spanish, Portuguese, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Haitian Creole. And again, depending on where you live, some of these might really surprise you as the top languages, other than English, of course, in Massachusetts. More languages are French, Italian, Russian, Cape Verdean, Creole, and Somalian, Arabic, and Syro-Croatian, This tells us who is in our area, who's in our states. So who are these students? Where do they come from? What languages do they speak at home? What are their customs? Who makes up their family? And what are their views on discipline, health, education, religion, and parent involvement? These are questions that we should ask. Say a little bit, Trini?
Yes, and especially for kids that are in the child welfare system. Again, that part of the culture that they might most clearly identify in the present is that foster care culture, but the deeper, the hidden part of their culture is their birth family's culture. And a lot of what they experienced as very small children varies according to what the culture was of their birth families. And I did want to point out, Roxanne, that I'm not sure that everybody knows that this country as a whole is now a majority minority, which means that 51% of the people living in the country are non-white and from various other cultures. And that's profound. And people need to realize that cultural competency is becoming much more important.
Definitely. When we think about barriers in cross-cultural competency, we think of sometimes language. If you speak two different languages, nonverbal communication, certain people have different gestures. Think about your own gestures. A lot of times when I'm speaking in front of a group and I'm cold, I cross my arms. And I have to watch my own nonverbal communication because I don't want people to think I'm disinterested in being there. But people look and they make these assumptions. We read people's language. And again, preconceptions and stereotypes, we all have them. And oftentimes they get away. They become huge barriers to anything successful we try to attain. In our face-to-face communication, 38% of this is the tone of our voice. If someone is talking really quietly and soft and you're straining to talk and understand them, it can be difficult and gives a communication barrier. If they're talking loud and you find it offensive, they could be hard of hearing themselves, or it could be just one of their gestures, just something that they do. But some people can get offended by that and they're taken off by it. Our hand gestures, our body gestures, 55% of that is our hand gestures. And sadly, only 7% of it is our words. So what you say, the actual words, is only 7% of it. When you interact and communicate with people through various communication forms, one of the most powerful forms of personal communication is face-to-face. It's easy for us to forget that our words are only 7% of the message we send. If you don't understand the word bom dia, no matter how I say it to you, if I can go bom dia, it means good day. But by my tone and my gestures, it doesn't work that way if you don't understand. So language and cross-cultural communication. Problems occur between native English speakers who have different cultural backgrounds. Oftentimes, even from people from different sides of the U.S. may use terms that other people don't use, like rotary and roundabout, sack and bag, tonic and soda, things that we don't even sometimes realize. And then when speakers differ from their native language and cultural background, ideally just because someone speaks Spanish doesn't mean they're from the same country. They have different words and terms, and sometimes things are difficult to explain. For nonverbal communication, body language, appearance. Sometimes we judge based on how somebody looks. Touch, there are some people who touch you when they talk to you, and others will be very offended by that, wouldn't deal with that well. We discussed tone of voice, eye contact. To some people it's rude to look in someone's eye, especially for children looking at adults, and in other terms it's rude not to look at an adult in their eye. So it can be very difficult. Sounds, speed of speech, when someone talks too slow or too fast, that can be the turn off. Seating arrangements. You look in a classroom, sometimes kids will sit in different areas for different reasons, or are more comfortable sitting in the back. And personal space, sometimes people are just really right on top of you, or some people will sit so far away from each other. And we discuss gestures, and others are silence. There are people who are just quiet, and we make judgment based on that. Some of the strategies in dealing with this is identifying your own nonverbal signals and how they might be interpreted. An example is a situation I gave when I crossed my arms. That's a nonverbal signal. And become aware of other types of nonverbal communication. And learn from each other. Spend time with other people from different cultures and realize that some of them have common nonverbal communication styles. Understanding the power of words. Language is a powerful transmitter of values and attitudes. So what we need to do is check for written materials for slang, jargon, and acronyms and abbreviations. And also sometimes when there's a lot of educational words that people commonly don't know or understand, like different types of evaluations and things like that, so explain them. Just take the time so that written communication is clear, and even verbal communication. Immigrant students and unaccompanied minors, some factors to consider. Is the length of residence in the U.S. Just when I spoke about Latin America in terms of culture, people have been here for different lengths of time. There's other different factors to consider. Also, their English language proficiency. Ideally, just because they understand you verbally doesn't mean they can understand the written language, or they might understand you to talk to you, but to say it back to you, they might not understand, so think about those things. Their prior experiences around the U.S. in education, the economic need of the families, their attitudes, positive or negative, the availability for families or students to get support in support groups, primarily in their language is something that is easy for them to understand. Having staff that speaks their language, and also the resident status. All of these things are big factors when we are working with immigrant students or unaccompanied minors. Some strategies are: get to know what challenges and stresses they're facing, and what fears they may have about their immigration status, and whether they're eligible for different types of programs. And how do you do that? Ideally, we can help you here at the Federation. And the rights of immigrant families. You need to learn the rights the families have as legal immigrants, what rights they have as undocumented immigrants, and what rights they have under the Federal Elementary, Secondary, and Education Act. As a family worker, the greater awareness of issues faced by immigrants related to shock, stress, and the struggle to cope and manage in a new environment, the more useful you'll be for helping immigrant families understand their experiences, strengths, and conflicts and challenges. Ask questions about where they come from, about their family members, and try to be more sensitive to their experiences. And also realize that some of their fears may trigger depending on their legal status of the family. Some immigrants are legal refugees and they are eligible for assistance from different programs that they don't know about. You always need to remember that in this country, all children have the right to education, and all parents need to be actively involved in their child's education if it is available. The definition of limited English proficiency for students. It's a student whose first language is other than English who is unable to perform ordinary classwork in English. According to the Title I Act, an adult or out-of-school youth who has limited ability to speak in reading and writing and understanding English, and whose native language is a language other than English, or who lives with a family or a community environment where a language other than English is the dominant language. Some of the rights for English language learners is, again, all students must receive quality education and taught by a highly qualified teacher. ELL students must learn English and other subjects at the same academic level as all the other students. And families must receive information regarding their child's performance on academic tests in the language that they understand best. Working with English language learners, some strategies to make sure that all communication is provided in all the languages needed. Encourage teachers and administrators to develop relationships with the students. And create an environment at the school or agency where students and parents or workers feel welcome regardless of their language or background. When you're working with English language learners, more strategies can be to reach out to service providers, parents with limited formal education by offering literacy and learning opportunities or homework help. Provide translation services and workshops in the parent's first language, and promote cultural sharing and understanding. Establishing trust and positive relationship will result in parents and SESPs as partners with teachers in schools. More involvement of parents and SESPs leading to higher achievement of their child. And parents and SESPs knowing that they play an important role in their students' education. Janie?
That's true. And absolutely, I know that the program that you work on, Roxanne, has evidence, has irrefutable proof that the more parents or SESPs are engaged in their children's education, the greater the academic achievement. So, of course, the key is to communicate not with the children but the families in a language and with a cultural competency that they feel comfortable with. So thank you so much for presenting. This is just a little reminder that we are having our conference, our annual conference for SESPs and for professionals that work with children in the child welfare system. Will be on November 10th at the Royal Best Western Royal Plaza Hotel. We are just getting ready to open registration, so you should be looking for that. And we hope to see a lot of you there. And I do believe that that is the end. And again, thank you so much for participating.
Thank you for having me today.
And if you have any other questions regarding cultural competency or what we've spoken about here today, let us know. You can write us at either of those emails or just give the Federation a call and we'll be glad to help you. Thank you, and we'll see you next month.
Goodbye.
Bye.